welcome everyone to today's webinar. Our speaker is Christopher Graham. Christopher Graham holds a degree in politics from Warwick University, a Cambridge Delta, and is a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. He's a freelance English language teaching consultant, teacher educator, and writer based in the UK. He's worked in the field since 1981 in over 30 countries for the British Council, Ministries of Education, and international publishers. In 2020, his projects included working on approaches to the digital provision of ELT during COVID-19 in fragile locations and delivering a large-scale professional development program online for the British Council in North Africa. Mr. Graham is one of the founders of ELT Footprint, a 2020 ELTon winner. He is currently working on research and materials, writing activities around ELT and climate change for the British Council as part of the Language Teaching for the Planet project. Okay, welcome. We're so happy to have you here, and we're looking forward to what you had to share with us.
Thank you very much, Anne, and welcome everybody. I can see we have 38, 40 people so far. I'm trying to guess where people are from their names, actually. It's a pity sometimes it doesn't say where people are from, so we can, when in your name, so we can identify you. It's always interesting to find where people are from. Though I wrote the introduction that Anne read out, I always find it rather depressing to realize that I've been working in English language teaching for such a long time. Every year is a year longer, isn't it? And anyway, maybe it's time I got a real job one day. I'm probably a little bit late for that, I think. Today I'm going to be spending about 90 minutes with you, of which the first part, the majority, will be in presentation format, but I will have you working in breakout rooms at different times, and our colleague will manage the breakout rooms for me. And there will at the end be time for some questions, discussions before we actually finish. So I'm hoping it will be reasonably interactive, because I'll be talking about, one of the things I'll be talking about is motivation in digital education. And I think one of the least motivating things is seeing somebody on a screen just talking to you for a long period of time, just a tiny little image of somebody talking. So I'm hopefully I'm going to practice what I preach by involving you and integrating different channels of communication into the work I'm going to do with you. Let me just share my screen with you. There we go. So it's around the theme of 21st century skills, and I suppose that first picture there gives you a bit of a clue where I'm sitting. I live in London in the UK, and I took that photograph on a very foggy day in the middle of the lockdown in the winter. So it's not always that foggy in London, but it is quite a lot of the time. But that gives you a clue where I'm sitting. So the first thing I want to think about is 21st century skills, and is it time to give them another name? That's something to think about, because calling them 21st century skills does make them very time. It kind of fixes their time somehow. So that's maybe something we want to address during the discussions. If you're interested in me, that's a summary. That's exactly what Anne just read to you. But as I say, I've been in English language teaching many years, but the last couple of years, most of the work that I've been doing has been around climate change and English language teaching, looking particularly two aspects. One is the impact that our global language teaching community makes on the climate, the impact we make. And many people think, well we don't. We're very eco-friendly. We're just teachers, we're just schools, we're just universities. Well, actually, we do make a huge impact. Flights, books, the energy we use, books particularly, I've already mentioned books. These all have an impact on the climate. But I'm also looking in the research I'm doing at the way that we can introduce climate education topics into our teaching. That's not what I'm talking about today, but most of my activities the last 2 years has been around climate change in language teaching. Some of you may have come across me at other conferences talking about that. But today I've got three assumptions, that's kind of working assumptions that I've got. The first one is we all have student engagement challenges. We all have those days, those weeks, those periods of times when we cannot get the students engaged. They just sit there and they won't somehow engage themselves. So if you don't have student engagement problems, you're either very lucky or very unusual, or you haven't noticed. Because I've always had them. I think everybody does, with different classes over the years. My next assumption or supposition is that 21st century skills are not actually new. They're part of what we've been teaching for many years. They may have been hidden, they may have been called something else, but they're not new. I think 21st century skills are interesting, particularly because so many course books now, if you look at the back page of the course book, you will find the expression 21st century skills. They're increasingly appearing in ELT course books, but I'm questioning their title, their name a little bit, and I'm also questioning the idea that they're actually new, or many of them actually new. Maybe there's something we're doing already. But I'm also going to talk today a little bit about online and digital education. I think it's impossible not to talk about online and digital education. We've all had, let's say, an interesting 18 months. It's a long time since this coronavirus, and most of us have been working online at some point. And I'm afraid to say, sadly, there's no guarantee that we won't find ourselves in another version of the virus or another outbreak at some point. So we'll certainly be back online at some point, and many institutions are teaching more online anyway than they did before. And my assumption is digital isn't better or worse, it's just different. So I want to talk a little bit about the digital impacts as well. So there's an overview. There's two tracks to the discussion that I'm going to have with you today. One is about 21st century skills, which is kind of the core area I want to talk about. But I also want to talk about digital education and online education, because I think we can't avoid it. You know, it's been so much part of our existence over the past 18 months or so, and as I say, we'll probably come back to it. And that photograph, by the way, is a bookshop in the city of Canterbury in the UK, and it really is collapsing. It's really leaning to one side. It must be the weight of books. I have the same problem with my bookcase behind me. It's a lovely idea, I think, of a bookshop that's actually collapsing through weight of books. So the two tracks to keep in mind. When you see this slide saying digital thoughts, you'll know I'm talking about digital application, not 21st century skills, but the two are absolutely mixed up together. But I've tried to separate the slides up a little bit. And talking about the slides, I will send Tesol Kuwait a PDF version of these slides. You don't have to make any notes or take any pictures. If you can, if you want to, but you don't have to. I'll send you a set of slides to Tesol, and they can then put them on the website or make them accessible to you somehow, so you can download them if you're interested in looking at them again. So don't worry about making notes or things like that. So in a second, I'm going to put you into breakout rooms. And what I'd like you to think about, very simply, is a brainstorm about 21st century skills. What are they? Are they important? If they are important, why are they important? What are the problems with teaching them? What advantages do they offer our students? Anything at all about 21st century skills. So when you go into the breakout rooms, we'll leave you in there for about 5 or 6 minutes, and then we'll bring you out. And when you come out, be ready to make any points that you want to. You can put them in the chat box, is the best way to communicate, or if you want to, switch on your microphone and speak. I'm perfectly happy with that. I just ask you to obviously respect other people. We could only have one person speaking at a time. So when you go into the breakout rooms, it's just a completely open, a blank sheet of paper about 21st century skills. What are they? Are they anything to do with language teaching? If they are important, why are they important? Any questions you want to answer. So could you send them into the breakout rooms, please, for 6 minutes, please, Myra? Is she there?
Okay, yes.
Okay, thank you. So you'll be randomly put in breakout rooms. All you have to do is just click accept, and you'll disappear. Are they going to the rooms?
I'm hoping they're going to the rooms. I'm staying. I haven't received an invitation.
No, I haven't.
Right.
Hopefully it's happening.
I hope it is too, because what I'm doing is I'm watching when people are going into the waiting room so that I can admit
You
them.
can bring them in. Yes, I can't. At the moment, everyone is still in the main room, I think.
Now, what I worry about is that possibly people have had trouble joining the same way that we did.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yes, that's also another issue. Have you had the breakout room introduction? Can somebody tell us if you've seen it? Because I can't see it. Maureen, have you had a breakout invitation?
She may possibly, why she's not answering is she may be in a breakout room.
No, she'd have disappeared if she was.
Oh, she said people are, Mara says, people are still joining. I am unable to create the breakout rooms.
Okay, not to worry. Got the message right. I'll change things slightly then. So what I'm going to do, apparently we can't make the breakout rooms, so I'll just stop screen sharing for a minute. So what I'd like you to do is to write in the chat box anything. Remember, the idea was a brainstorm about 21st century skills. If you hear the words 21st century skills, what comes to your mind? So put anything you want to in the chat box. And yeah, apparently, yes, I'm just reading the messages now. Okay, collaboration amongst learners. Just write some ideas in the chat box. That's perfectly good to do. We've already got Sujita said collaboration among learners. Put your ideas in the chat box and I'll call them out. Apparently you're unable to unmute. Keyboard skill, yeah, I agree with that. Critical thinking, Altaf, thank you. Anything, just put it in the chat box. Digital engagement, nice. Meaningful learning and communication, good, yes. Critical thinking comes again. Creativity comes, okay. Teams, teamwork. You're sending, people are sending direct messages to me. Please send your messages to the whole group. Send your messages to everyone, that's it. Not to me. I'm only getting direct messages for some reason. Everyone, that's better, yes, okay. If you send them to everyone, now send them to everyone, otherwise people can't see them. Cindy, she's got the 4 C's there and some other things as well. Yeah, thank you. Send them to everyone, we can all see them. Student engagement, transferable academic skills. You don't have an everyone option. You should have. I think everybody has the everyone option. Some people say they don't. Okay, critical thinking. I've got lots and lots of ideas. Wow, I'm drowning in ideas. You got it now, thank you. Social constructivism. Oh, Nabil, that's a very intellectual concept for so early in the morning, or early in the morning for me. Okay, lovely. We've got lots of ideas. Let me now go back. I think everyone now has the everyone option, hopefully. So let's imagine you've been in the breakout room. We've collected those ideas. You can see the ideas in the chat box yourselves as well. Let's look at this possible structure. This is probably the most common structure, the most widely used structure. And quite a few people had this famous 4 C's. Critical thinking and problem solving, collaboration and communication, creativity and imagination, citizenship. They came up a lot in the chat box, and that's absolutely appropriate. They should. And some of you who've looked at this before will probably know that these were created by an organization in the United States called the Partnership for 21st Century Skills. They've renamed themselves since then, but that website is still, that link is still valid, and we'll tell you more about that traditional structure. And there's also quite a big substructure as well. This is taken from the same website, and you'll see across the top, the orange band across the top: critical thinking, communication, collaboration, creativity, the ones we've just had. But we also have life and career skills on one side, and something people mention quite a lot: information, media, and technology skills. And along the bottom are the ways of achieving those skills. So you can see that there is a fairly universal standard structure or taxonomy, if you wish, of 21st century skills. That's fine, and that is what many people work from. But to me, it's quite a big jump from that to my classroom. The connection may not be obvious, and much of the terminology may not be easy for us to adapt to classroom purposes, but I think it's a very good structure to work from. So now I want to think a little bit about some digital things. Now, again, we still can't have breakout rooms, I don't think. Is that right? And do we still not have breakout rooms?
It's Mara who creates them.
Myra, can we have breakout rooms, or it's not possible?
Yes, it is possible.
Okay, can you put people into breakout rooms now then, please, Myra? Well, just before you do, Myra, each breakout room will either be a group 1 or a group 2. If you're group 1, I want you to think about what you miss as teachers when you're working online. If you're group 2, there's my cat, what you think students miss about online. So in a second, we'll look at the breakout rooms.
Okay, may I ask if you want 10 breakout rooms or only 2?
How many people have we got? Let's have 10 breakout rooms, yeah? And if you're in breakout room 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you're a group 1. If you're in breakout room 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you're a group 2.
Okay, noted.
So if you're group 1, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you're looking at it from a teacher's perspective. Group 2 is from the student's perspective. And you should get the breakout room invitation very soon. Is it okay, Myra? Can you do it? It's not appearing yet. Okay, I think what we'll do, because of time, can we do something slightly different? I'll have the breakout rooms now. In general, the answer to the question, somebody asked me a question. Right, into the rooms, please. And remember, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, rooms 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, look at the point of view of teachers, and 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, look at the point of view from students. student's point of view. You need to accept the invitations as quickly as you can. You should have them there. Just click your invitations, please. Okay, most people are in a room now, just a few people to go in. So Mara, I'll close the rooms in about 5 minutes, yeah? Yeah, thank you.
Mara, I've written in the chat box, we have a person who has not received an invitation.
Okay, I've closed the rooms. People are coming back. Most people are back. So in the chat box, can you just share one or two ideas that you discussed in your group, please? Either remember from the perspective on one side of a teacher, how you think digital education has impacted on you, what you miss about face-to-face, or equally from the point of view of the student. The human connection, let me have a look. Physical interaction, working with students one-to-one, that's a nice one. Okay, motivation, put your ideas in, remember, to everyone, yeah? Any ideas, just pop them into the box. Time management, interesting. Connectivity problems, yeah, we know about those. Eye contact, yes, that's interesting too, isn't it? Presence of social cues. Body language, yeah, it's very robotic sometimes, isn't it? Well, body language again. Economic issues facing parents. Yes, not everybody has access to the internet, or indeed sufficiently high-speed internet. Discipline. I imagine that's about students, not teachers. There's sometimes you're surprised, I'm surprised. Parents not ready to support and guidance. Lots of ideas. Okay, thank you. Low engagement of learners and motivation. Well, let me now just share my screen again for a second. So remember, we looked at it from the point of view of teachers, and we looked at it from the point of view of students with my cat, who is not a student because she never learns anything. So we've talked about it a little bit. Here's some ideas of mine. The things that teachers have been saying to me is the lack of collegiality, the lack of professional community is one thing. Teachers find working online very intense. You're absolutely in focus, concentrated, in the limelight, in the spotlight all the time. You are less so in class, I think. It's very teacher-centered. We spend a lot of time, people like me, teacher educators like me, telling teachers to make classes more learner-centered. Online is very teacher-centered. That's why I tried to use the breakout rooms, because that's one way of decentering it. It's very teacher-centered. It's very impersonal. And a few thoughts of what students say. They miss chatting with friends. Collegiality, we call it, because they feel isolated. It's too much. It's too heavy. It's just listening to the teacher. That's the student's perception of teacher-centeredness. Students are shy because when we ask them to speak to the whole class, to the whole group, it's very public, isn't it? So they think, oh, I can't do this. In a class, they kind of disappear, don't they? They can speak English, but there's so many people speaking at the same time, it's not obvious. Online, it's more obvious, it's more public. We feel like robots. Sometimes tech things go wrong and I feel lost. The students are pushed out of the room, they lose connectivity, they don't know how to unmute, or they auto-mute. All these technological problems, and they feel lost. It's very public. Sometimes I want to talk to the teacher privately. Somebody put in the chat box one-to-one. Well, we don't have that so easily. Other things students say, I know lots of cool ways to make the content look more interesting. Yeah, students are good at designing PDFs, at designing worksheets, at designing slides. They often have better ideas than we do about how to make online content more appealing. It's very public. They can't speak privately. Teachers don't talk to us about the lessons anymore or ask for feedback. That's interesting, isn't it? We just deliver it online rather than in a lesson. We might say, did you enjoy that? Did you find that too easy? Would you like to do another one next week? Teachers don't seem to do that so much online. The project work, the designing posters, all these exciting things tend to get lost online. Videos, teachers quite naturally use a lot of video online, but very often the students just find them too long and they get lost in them. We like breakout rooms, but where's the teacher? You know, when you're running breakout rooms, you can visit the breakout rooms. You can go and join in and chat and then leave breakout room 1 and go to breakout room 5. Students miss you being with them. And I've forgotten what the teacher looks like. All we see is slides. So these are the kind of comments that students make. So these are some of the problems that we have. So now we're going back to 21st century skills again, and I want to talk about transferability. By transferability, I mean that 21st century skills, not only are they not new, it's a treble negative, let's put it a better way, 21st century skills are not new, but many of them are easily transferred from existing skills that we use all the time as human beings. And here are some of the sub-skills that we actually regularly use. And most of these can fit under 21st century skills. Information literacy, note-taking, questioning and expressing opinions, building rapport, reasoning. All of these, you can read the list yourself. All of these are things that most of us and our students use in different ways, at different levels according to their age and their maturity on a regular basis. Building rapport. If any of you are primary teachers, primary students, one of the things they're learning, forget English, forget maths, forget science, one of the things that small children are learning all the time is how to build that relationship with another human being. What behaviors are appropriate to what contexts. Team working. Primary kids work in teams. Secondary students work in teams. University students work in teams. Making presentations. We've been teaching secondary students to make presentations for years, haven't we? There's nothing new in that. What else have we got? Note-taking. Even upper primary students start to make notes, and obviously senior high school students learn to make notes as well. None of these skills are new. They all fit under the various categories of 21st century skills, but my point is we've been doing them for years. Maybe we didn't have a name for them before, but there's nothing new about them, and they're very easily transferable, certainly. So think about that. The 21st century skills are not new. Maybe we just had different names for them. Because I think one of the problems with 21st century skills, there were two problems for me. One is some teachers still are not quite sure what they are. They hear about it on the back of a book, or they read it on a website of 21st century skills, or a new curriculum says, we're integrating 21st century skills this year into our work. A lot of teachers aren't sure what they are. My central point is, in most cases, there is nothing really new. I mean, digital literacy is a new skill because the digital world is new. But it's something students are doing every time they go online. It's nothing actually new to them. So the first thing I would say is to teachers, don't worry, don't panic. It's not actually anything new. The second problem, which we'll be exploring later on, is how we can make these 21st century skills motivate our students, how we can make them motivating. And we'll explore that a little bit later on. Now to think about digital for a second. I think the social aspect, which students say they miss, chatting with their friends. I'm a great believer in using breakout rooms before we start lessons, after lessons, and in breaks. I use them a lot. If I do a whole day of a teacher development course online, maybe 4 hours, 5 hours, in the breaks, I open breakout rooms and I allocate teachers at random to different breakout rooms. Sometimes I give them a task, sometimes I don't. And it's really, really interesting. They just start chatting. It's the thing that students do in the corridors or in the playground. And students are the same. If you put students in their break, or just before that, or just after lesson, in a breakout room, they start to socialize. And it lifts them. You can say, oh, I'm chatting, I haven't seen you for ages. How are you? Oh, I'm fine. Oh, how's your sister? She's good. Da, 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 da. All the conversations start. So I think using breakout rooms to create that collegiality, that sense of community is very important. You can give people a task if you want to. Go into a breakout room and talk about this, but you don't have to. It may be better if you don't in some cases. You just want people to speak and to engage. And another thing, intensity was a problem. A lot of people find working online very intense. So one way of dealing with that is different interaction patterns. Mixed media. Start with mixed media, using some video, using some PowerPoints, using some PDFs, having students working in breakout rooms, having students using chat boxes. Remember, students can do pair work through private chat on Zoom. You can just have student A talking to student B in the Zoom chat box, which is like pair work. Lots and lots of changes of interaction patterns help to break up the intensity and include individual work. Just because we are working online, we don't all have to be together all the time. There's no harm in saying, this activity, I want you to do it on your own. You have 5 minutes. So they work for 5 minutes and then you bring them back again. But just because we're online, we don't all have to be together. So lots and lots of changes of pace and interaction, I think. So now back to 21st century skills. And I want to think about learning outcomes. I think with 21st century skills, it's very important students understand what they're doing, what we can hope they will achieve. Now, I'm sure you've all learned a lot about, you've read a lot and heard a lot about learning outcomes over the years. But remember, learning outcomes are only valid if they are measurable and can be evaluated. In other words, what will students be able to do at the end of the lesson that they can't do now, and how will you be able to measure it? And much of the measurability about learning outcomes comes from the verbs that we use, measurable verbs. And good outcomes motivate students. They know what they're doing. They know why they're there. So we'll often have learning outcomes around grammar points. By the end of this lesson, students will be able to show they can use the first conditional tense. By the end of this lesson, students will be able to show they can lead a discussion. Perfectly good learning outcome. It's somehow measurable too. It's demonstrable. You can see it. I think we need to have them for 21st century skills as well. Measurable outcomes. And as I said, it's all about the verbs. You'll notice that we have demonstrate, sort, show, solve, identify, construct, write, describe, and use as verbs that we can use in learning outcomes. I haven't got study, and I haven't got learn. Because in my opinion, both of those are very hard things to measure. If a student demonstrates something, I can think, yes, she can do it very well, quite well, not very well, not at all, very badly, whatever I decide to use. Another one we have there, show, solve. These are all demonstrable. They're all ways that we can see the students have made progress. So remember, verbs matter a lot when we're writing learning outcomes. Now, we've got two ways of thinking about 21st century skills. One, if we are with older students, high school, university, or even students in the workplace, maybe in a vocational institution or something where you have students who are already on their career path. These 21st century skills are very work or possibly study based. Obtaining and processing information, creating and editing reports. That's one way of expressing 21st century skills. And as I say, it's very appropriate for university students, workplace students, people already in the workplace, students getting ready for the workplace, maybe foundation year students getting ready to go into academic study, because all of these are important skills that they will need. And we can very easily make a nice learning outcome. After lesson, you'll be able to show you can work in a team. Show, because I can watch you five, how you're working together in a team. And I can say, okay, you weren't really a team because there were 6 of you, but only 2 of you were speaking. 4 of you were silent. That's not a team, is it? So I can somehow evaluate that. So 21st century skills leading to learning outcomes that you can measure exactly the same way as you would measure a learning outcome related to talking about the future in English. Exactly the same as a learning outcome about organizing and designing a presentation in English. These are things that we can evaluate. And from this that you saw before, remember, these are sub-skills. These things all students do. They may not know the vocabulary terminology for it, but they do it. As I said, primary students build rapport. You might call it making friends. It's the same thing, essentially. It's creating that relationship. And in the same way, you can make a nice, accessible, motivating learning outcome. After lesson, you'll be able to demonstrate you can make good notes. And you can look at their notes and you say, okay, these notes are really excellent because they reflect the key points in the listening. Look at these notes. Now let's read the listening. Something's missing. You didn't get the 3 points at the end. So we need to work on note making. Again, it's measurability. And I think 21st century skills are much more accessible and motivating to students if we deliver them through, or before we start to teach them, students have very clear, measurable learning outcomes using some of the verbs that I suggested a little bit earlier on. Now we jump back into digital again. Surgeries. A lot of students say that they can't get to the teacher. They can't talk to the teacher. I think it's a nice idea if you're working online, or even if you're still working face-to-face, and you sometimes go online, to offer time-specific and time-limited one-to-one surgeries with students, much as the doctor does. Say, I will be available from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. If you want to have a 5-minute opportunity to come and talk to me, book it, and I'll be here ready to speak to you. I tell you, the first once or twice you do it, you won't get very many students. After about 3 times of doing it, you will be overbooked and have to make a longer surgery or another surgery on a different time. Students do really appreciate it. If you're online a lot, they appreciate the chance of having some one-to-one online with you, just you and the student. Equally, if you're working in class a lot, you can still have online surgeries. The good thing about an online surgery, you and the student, is it's private. And you can say to the student, look, I'm really very happy with ABC, but we do need to talk about X, Y, Z. And that's not something you often get the chance to do. And online facilitates that so well. So surgeries, I think, are a really nice idea. And as I say, beginning, students say, oh, I don't think I want to do that. But they do. And once they, oh, that was really good. Can we do another one next week? Or you have to control it. As I say, time specific and time limited is very important. Otherwise, you lose a lot of your private time. I mean, some institutions build it into teaching time, individual surgeries. And I would encourage you, if you're in a management position in an institution, to think about that. I think it's a really useful tool to use, online surgeries. Interaction. Somebody talked about non-verbal. That's a very exciting moose in Finland. Talked about non-verbal communication. It's great fun if you're working with students on Zoom sometimes to tell them to mute and to make them communicate on mute for about 10 minutes without using any sound. It puts them into that channel of non-verbal communication, speaking only with gesture or face. It reminds them of the importance of that. And it also somehow, I find, is a very humanizing activity, just to be speaking. I mean, it's not speaking, but communicating simply using the face and using gesture without using words. So it's quite a fun thing to do, I think. So 21st century skills as methodology, the best way to teach them. The first thing I want to ask you about is that picture. Now that picture, any of you that have been to London may recognise that as the City of London, the financial district. That picture was taken from a street about half a kilometre from where I live. Everybody who looks at that picture tries to press the arrow because they think it's a video. It's not a video. It is the roof of the building at the front. And I wonder whether the architect had a sense of humour when they designed it. That everybody would think it looks just like a video clip, and everybody tries clicking it, but it's not, believe me, it's the roof of that building. So I quite enjoy showing that to people. But my point about this is this: the best way probably to teach 21st century skills and to demonstrate 21st century skills is to use them in the way we teach, to use them as part of our methodology. Because if you think about it, and I'll show you some examples in a second, we actually do use 21st century skills a lot in our methodology, in what we do in class with our students. So you think about it. Look at those. These are things that we all do all the time with our students. They're very common day-to-day either activities or classroom management techniques. That the two are very often mixed up, aren't they? But they are interactions that we have in our classes. We give instructions, we have students working in pairs, we encourage peer correction, we get students doing jigsaw reading, you know, when the text is cut up. We allocate students online research tasks. Go home tonight and have a look on the internet and see if you can find ABC, and we'll talk about it tomorrow in class or online. We all do these things. There's nothing new here. But what interests me is all of these, just about, can fit under at least one of those 4 C's that we saw at the beginning. You remember? Communication, collaboration, critical thinking. Those 4 C's. We can fit these under those headings. Giving instructions is communication, isn't it? Pair work is collaboration. Project work is collaboration. Peer correction is collaboration. Discussing grammar is collaboration. These are all things that we do in our students all the time. Presentations, communication. Online tasks is a digital activity. Yeah, they all fit under the different headings quite nicely. So it seems to me that one way to develop and practice 21st century skills is if you, for example, put students together to do discussing grammar. Yeah, I think for me the most effective way of teaching grammar is when students work together in a small group of 5 or 6 students, and they look at the grammar point you're trying to develop. They discuss it. That one's got ing, that's got ing, that hasn't, so that's different. That's big. Okay, we've got it. It's a magical moment in a class, isn't it, when students are talking about grammar. Doesn't happen very often, but when it does, I'm convinced learning is happening. But discussing grammar together is collaboration. That's working together. Somebody might say, I remember, isn't that called the gerund or something? I remember. Oh, of course. Now, is that a verb or is it a noun? I think it's a verb. Yeah, but it looks like a noun. John, that's the one. That's a verb that thinks it's a noun. So, okay. And they process it and they come to agreement. That's learning in action. It's also the 21st century skill of collaboration in action. And I think it's nice when the students have finished at that activity, you don't only talk about the grammar, the language, the task, but you also talk about how they did it and say, so what did you do? Well, she seemed to know it, so we listened to her, but then he thought it was this, and you piece together the process. And what do you call that? Collaboration. Well, that's collaboration, and that's a 21st century skill. So you analyze not just the end result, but you analyze the process. And you can do that for all of this. So I think that's a very effective way of demonstrating, or having the students demonstrate, and for you to point out the 21st century skills. Because in isolation, on their own, the problem with 21st century skills is students don't always connect them with their class. They don't see the connection. Here they can. Students working together, making a poster. collaborating on a poster. That is a 21st century skill of collaboration. She's really good at drawing, so she did the pictures of the animals. He's not so good at drawing, but he's a beautiful handwriter, so he did that. Blah, 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 blah. Collaboration is demonstrated. And you can very often easily do that with your classes. So jumping to digital thinking now. Another thing to think about is decentering the teacher. Pushing things away from you to the student. Pair work in private chat, using the whiteboard. Remember, all the platforms, Zoom, Teams, all of them have a whiteboard you can use. Bringing in other platforms like Canva. I use Canva a lot, which is a lovely way for students to work collaboratively. There you have it again, collaborative work learning, to make a PDF, to make a poster, to make an invitation, to make a form that they can very easily slide into Zoom and present it. Lots of activities in breakout rooms as much as possible. I'm not using breakout rooms so much today because we have a very large group, and the problem with 60 or 70 people is it's difficult to manage that large number in breakout rooms. Sometimes having the students as hosts, pushing you to one side, saying, okay, today you are going to be the host and you two are going to be the co-host for the first 10 minutes. So you're decentering things a little bit. Another thing I like to have is a back channel or a hotline. A back channel is a way of communicating privately with students, because a lot of students panic if the technology goes wrong and I don't know what to do. I don't know who to contact. Panic. It's the same with teachers. You know, this morning one or two people had problems logging in. You need a back channel, a way of communicating with the teacher or whoever to say help. A lot of people use WhatsApp. A platform that I use a lot with teachers is one called Slack. Slack is a team management thing. If you have it's very easy to use. It's free. You can have group conversations and individual conversations. It's a way for people to say help. Of course, the good thing about using, for example, WhatsApp is it's not online. You don't need to be online to use it. You can use it on most people use it on their phones. But it can just be a mobile phone number. You need a way to keep in touch outside of Zoom or outside of Teams or whichever platform we're using in case things go wrong. Because the way of the technology was, if something can go wrong, it will go wrong. And that's a way of managing that and mitigating the circumstances a little bit. And I think putting students in control, as I said before, making them hosts, encouraging them to set up, or you setting up and encourage them to use a chat room or a forum. Another way of putting them in control is to say, we have an online, it could be Facebook. There are lots of platforms, a Facebook group for each secondary class. And you say to them, if you have a question, before you ask me, ask the group. And if the group can't help you, come to me. So there we have digital, supporting the 21st century skill of collaboration. You're still available, but it actually does help to create a degree of autonomous learning. And it also empowers them, it puts them in control. And I mentioned before that some students say, oh, I could design things better than the teacher can for online. Well, fine, let them do it. Making them projects to design worksheets is a fantastic thing to do. You actually give the questions. Okay, take these questions home tonight and make me a nice worksheet. Some students won't be able to do it. Some of them will be absolutely fantastic. So giving them control also eases the intensity of the online process, I think. I want to look now at some challenges around 21st century skills. And the way I've done this, actually, I don't know what Dr. Freud, the psychologist, would think of this, but I've actually chosen one or two extracts from a book that I did last year about 21st century skills, because some of these challenges are quite complex, and I just wanted to share with you some ideas here for you to have a little bit of a think about. The first problem is that it's a cultural thing. Some students from some cultures find it difficult, for example, to use critical thinking or problem solving. It's not a cultural norm. And that's not a criticism of the culture, it's a fact of life. Every culture has its norms, has its ways of doing things. So critical thinking is easier to teach with some students than it is with others for cultural reasons. And that's something that needs to be managed, I think. So how we deal with that requires a lot of teaching and classroom management. Students may be reluctant to ask questions or to challenge things, and 21st century skills, the skill that most people pick up, and indeed you picked up in the chat box, was critical thinking. Not all cultures do as much critical thinking as others do. I mean, in Sweden, it's taught as a subject in schools. In other countries, it's not. So it's just a question of circumstance, I think, but it does need to be managed. Another challenge is that quite a lot of 21st century skills require public performance. They require the students to speak. I mean, it's making a presentation. Team working requires you to say, no, can I speak for a minute? Because I think this. You know, we've all worked in a team, and virtually every team I've been in has been dominated by one person, not always me, before you think that, though I would plead guilty to that sometimes. But teams suffer from being dominated. So it's difficult for some people to say, can I just come in here, please? Or I've got to do a presentation to everybody. It's a panic. So we need to manage that, because it's a big problem with 21st century skills, public performance. So we've got to make sure it doesn't become an ordeal and self-confidence goes down, it plummets down. We've got to manage it very carefully. It's a psychological question, often around individual students or small groups of students sometimes. The other really big question is to how we can assess 21st century skills. Because if we look at critical thinking, how can you measure critical thinking? How can you assess critical thinking? Yeah, we're not bad as ELT people now at measuring language improvement. Most of us think at the beginning of the term, the beginning of the semester, the end of the semester, we've got more of an idea about how much better these students are at this aspect of language. We can do that. Critical thinking, not so much. Collaboration, how do you measure collaboration? Well, I think you can. And I think it's this. So, I mean, the distinction here is most 21st century skills have a language element, they're language dependent, and a skills element. Now, communication in 21st century skills is not about English. It's about communication. It could be about gesture, postures, these kinds of things, not just about language. So we've got to make that separation. Is it a language thing or is it a skills thing? Collaboration is not about English. There are ways of using English to collaborate, but collaboration is more of a mindset, isn't it? It's more, yeah, I'm open, I'll listen. Okay, I realize I'm speaking too much, so I stop. So it's quite complex, but I think the way to do it is to think about this, to think about creating a kind of ethos in the classroom, a kind of environment in the classroom. If our default for looking at grammar is collaboration, if our default for after a piece of writing is peer correction and peer editing, if that's the default, 21st century skills, collaboration, communication, slowly become, they kind of filter into our environments. That makes it the norm. We look at things through the eyes of a collaborative person. We look at things through the eyes of a supportive person, and it becomes part of the classroom. And when we come to measure it, what I think we need to measure is not the outcome, but that process. So if we're looking at for example, collaborative writing, I think collaborative writing is a really effective way to develop students' writing, when you get 2 or 3 students writing something together. But after they've constructed the plan and written the text, they will then look at it and edit it and comment and change either the language or the structure. All this is a collaborative process. Now, I am interested as much from a 21st century skills perspective rather than a language perspective. I'm interested in that process because I can evaluate or assess the process. Yes, they did work together. There was one member of that little group who was very quiet, but that guy said to him, "What do you think?" He did dominate, but they said to him, look, could we speak, please? Ah, that's good to see that happening. So I'm looking at the process, not the end result. It's the same with critical thinking. The end result in some ways doesn't matter. What matters is the process. So I think we can assess, but it's all easier if 21st century skills becomes the default of how we work. We work through the 21st century skills lenses. We don't, the teacher doesn't say, no, that's wrong. The answer is this. The teacher says, I'm not sure about that. Why don't you three from that group go and sit with the three from that group and see if they know what the answer is? Collaboration, communication, and language learning together. Let's look at another little digital slice. Develop a structure and approach and use it. Students, remember, like course books because those course books have a structure. Section 1, Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3, Unit 1, Section 1, Unit 1, Section 2. Yeah, each unit is the same. One of the problems with online is it can be a bit chaotic. So develop a structure and approach, explain it and use it. For example, at the beginning of this, I said to you that I've got two strands. I'm looking at 21st century skills and I'm looking at digital, two things. I told you that at the beginning, so you know when I move from one section to the other. And I use a slide to label that, say digital. In fact, I use, where is it? That slide. So when you see that slide, you know we're moving to another section. So I think develop a structure and approach to your teaching and use it. Familiarity is not always a bad thing. Familiarity can allow students, we know where we are, we feel comfortable here. Because I think students get lost online. Course book, they don't. But if you start to move away from the course book, which many of us do online and bring in other materials and videos and all these things, they get a bit lost. So try to keep a structure, familiar structure, and use it, creative structure and use it. In breakout rooms, I don't think you can just shut students in the room and forget about them. I think you need to be ready to go into them, to intervene and say, come on, don't forget to talk about this. Don't forget to talk about that. You need to support people. Have you said anything? You're very quiet. What do you think? Yeah, do that job sometimes of making sure everybody speaks. Guiding, if you think they're going off in the wrong direction, try to bring them back. Encourage them. Great, well done, well done. Cajole, there's a word. You may need a dictionary for the word cajole. It's not an everyday word. Cajole means encourage very strongly. Come on, guys, you've got 2 minutes left. What have you been talking about? Sometimes we need to do that. We need to say, come on, can you get to the task, please? So breakout rooms, we need to manage them. We need to keep them moving, I think. And show your face. Don't disappear. Most of you are not showing your faces. In a minute, I'm going to ask you to show your faces when we have questions. I like to see people's faces. I know for some reason, technical reasons, you can't always do it because it uses a lot of bandwidth. I understand that. But I do encourage teachers, obviously, to show their faces, but I also encourage students to show their faces as well. Don't hide away. I don't think that's psychologically a very good thing to do. So does anybody have any questions, problems, alarms, or despondencies? I'm going to stop sharing because I've said everything I want to say. Now, I'm very happy to have any questions. Are you able to unmute? I don't know whether are they allowed to unmute?
Yes.
They are. So if you want to speak, I'll be delighted to speak. I'll be delighted to see your faces. Don't be embarrassed to show your faces. I like people's faces. There we are. We've got Anne's face there. So if you have any questions, I'll have a quick look in the chat box because when we're screen sharing, I can't see the chat box. Quick look in the chat box. But equally, if anybody wants to ask me anything, just switch off, show me your face, switch on your microphone, and I will do my best to answer.
Okay,
you're just saying nice things about me.
I'll start it off, Chris.
Thank you, Anne.
Trying to get students to participate in online discussions. It seems it's like the same 1 or 2 students everywhere. And
dominating.
Well, no, because I will call on students' names, and of course it's later on, oh, miss, I was having technical problems. You know, it's like, and it's always the same ones. But even I will pause and I'll go, hey guys, it's going to be a long session because I'm not going to talk. I need you to talk. And one time I timed it 5 minutes. And I said, Ahmed, you may not speak. I appreciate it, but I want to hear from the others. What suggestions do you have?
So there's two sides. One is encouraging those who just don't want to get involved, and then kind of controlling those who want to dominate, I suppose. Well, I have to say, I find the format that we're in now with everybody in the room, let's call this the classroom, I find this, I personally don't, but I know a lot of students find it difficult because, as I said before, it's very public. So I think putting them into smaller groups, putting them into groups of maybe 4, and as I said, managing it, going to each group. I mean, I literally go down the breakout rooms, this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I go back to the top and come down again. And I'll go in, and they know you're there. You're not spying on them. You're sitting there. I'll sit there, and I'll just watch, and I will do those things. I'll say, okay, Ahmed, thank you, but I think I might even say to the other students, has Ahmed been talking a lot? They'll probably laugh. Oh, he has. Ahmed, come on, let these two say something. I think it's much easier in small groups because in this large public space, it is quite difficult. I mean, I understand that. It is probably hard enough in your first language, and now we're asking you to do it in a second language. I think that, and I suppose the other reality is the topic. My very first teaching job was in Italy. I mean, you reminded me earlier how many years I've been teaching, and it was in Italy, my first teaching job. And I had a group of Italian teenagers, and they were horrible. I mean, we've all taught teenagers. They can be pretty difficult sometimes. They didn't want to be learning English. They wanted to be out doing teenage things. And I lived in the city of Florence in Italy. And I had an idea because it was the winter and the football season. And I came in and I sat down in front, and they were nearly all boys as well. And I said to them, oh, Florence, what a dreadful team. I watched them last night. They were awful. They were just embarrassing. And suddenly I had 16 Italian boys absolutely engaged, shouting at me in English. Because for them, the problem about motivation had just gone. I knew that, of course, that's why I chose it. I know nothing about football. I hate football, but I knew that would work. So I think sometimes the topic, and remember, the great thing about online with breakout rooms is you can have 6 breakout rooms, 6 different topics, and you can match people to topics, or people can choose a topic with the same language, but just a slightly different theme. So I think you can do that as well. Let me look in the chat. I'll go from the bottom upwards. Teacher improved time management skills. Well, I'm quite lucky. I don't usually have to look at my watch. I think that's either by many years experience or luck. I think perhaps the way to, if you do have, I mean, time management tends to go in 2 directions. You either finish early without enough material, or you go over. You don't get a chance to finish material in the allocated time. Is to keep a kind of a time log. In other words, to time when you make your lesson plan, so this is going to be 5 minutes, this is going to be 12 minutes, it's going to be 8 minutes. And as the lesson proceeds, you'll actually write down where it should have been 8 minutes, but it was 5 minutes. So I know I've got 3 minutes extra in my hand that I'm going to use later on to do a live comparison with yourself. But I suppose really, if I'm really honest, time management's important, but what's more important for me is to go at the speed of the students, not at the speed of the lesson. So for me, it's thinking, these students are finding this actually very challenging. I'm going to have to slow down. We're going to have to do that again, or we're going to do this in a different way. So I try to go at the speed of the average student. I know the word average is pretty meaningless, but let's say the average of the student in the middle somewhere. There's always going to be some who are running ahead. I know that. There's going to be some who are struggling. That's life. We know that. But I try to go at the speed of the majority. What matters to me is the speed of the student, not the speed of the course book. But I know in reality, we live in a world of timetables and curriculum and syllabus and examinations and administration and all that stuff. But where we can, to try to go at the speed of the student, or the average student, the student in the middle somewhere. Students disappear and not say a word. Yeah, I mean, there are students, you don't even know if they're there, do you? They're just sitting there sometimes. What else have we got in the box? Can we have the slides? Yes, they'll be made available. At our school, Christian says it's mandatory students and teachers have the cameras on. Yeah, I don't know whether mandatory is a good thing, but I encourage people to, certainly. Pressure on teachers to finish the curriculum. Yeah, Danielle, I absolutely agree with that. We live in, as I say, we live in a world of ministerial control, and we live in a world of not learning outcomes, but simply completing a page. I mean, sometimes when I'm working with new teachers, I'll ask them to write an outcome, and they'll say, the outcome of the lesson is to do page 5. Doing page 5 is not an outcome. Doing page 5 is just an administrative label. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Sometimes parents consider it a problem. Why parents a problem? I'm not sure. Maybe there's a bit more context. Let me scroll up. Should we share the outcomes of each session? Personally, yes. I mean, outcomes have to be in a level of language, both complexity and intellectual maturity complexity related to the age of the student, of course. But yes, I mean, if you think about it, you're sitting with a group of students for 45 minutes or an hour, whatever length of time, however long you're with people. I think it's reasonable for them to know what is going to be happening there. And if they can know by 5 o'clock, I'll be better at this, I think that's a motivator, isn't it? It allows them to see a structure. Of course, you'll never meet all the learning outcomes, of course, we know that. It's a guide. But personally, I always put outcomes at the beginning. I mean, I don't teach students anymore, but I run all sorts of teach development workshops, and I will, for a day's workshop, I will give learning outcomes. I don't for a short session like this because there's always much more discussion. Do I recommend, 1 second, Fatma, do you recommend highlighting tasks like the slides, like 3-minute tasks? Yeah, it's a nice thing to do that. Either putting it on the slide or orally saying you have 3 minutes. I absolutely think you need to give time limits, because online time is somehow different, isn't it? It just sort of, it just disappears. And you suddenly, oh, it's 5 o'clock. Oh, well, I've only done the first part. It's easy for that to happen. Absolutely giving online times. And that's why when I use breakout rooms, I don't just leave it open. I will say you have 6 minutes. And I'll warn them, as I warned you. I think I came in and said, you have 4 minutes left. You know, you can send a message to all the rooms. And I always set up the facility that people have 60 seconds to get out. So it's not, they're not just kicked out. I think that external control of time is really important. People get lost. And as I said, it's funny, the students say that chatting to their friends, collegiality is what they miss. And they see they go to Breakout and they see it's an opportunity to chat to their friends, which is fantastic, which is why I suggest that you have social breakout rooms as well to do the chatting with friends. And of course, they're chatting with friends when they're supposed to be doing a task, they run out of time. So I think that's important. Okay, Yasim says something about, oh yeah, parents and online, it can be a disaster in my experience, especially if they're not parents who are, let's say, digitally literate themselves. I get very angry about a lot of things, but our Minister of Education in this country recently said he's so glad that, because our schools are back to normal, as I'm sure yours are, relative normality now. My youngest son is still at school, is back now, but he lost nearly a year. He was online. He lost going into school. But the Minister of Education said, now teachers can go back to school and do some teaching after a year online. And his suggestion was that online teaching is not teaching. I think it's even harder. And a lot of parents also believe it's not teaching or learning. So yeah, parents need to be educated. I think parents need to be sent a document, in your case in Arabic, explaining what is going on, what's expected of them. Okay, we've got some other interesting questions here. I apologize if I don't answer all questions. I will miss some inevitably. What have we got here? How to make a virtual classroom effective? Well, there's whole workshops to be done on that, but for me, it's, you know, I don't see a huge difference between a virtual classroom and a face-to-face classroom, really. I think you can do nearly all of the same things. Okay, you do lose that sense of humanity of being physically in the same room or near to a student, and we can only try to replicate that online. I think all the same things that we would talk about in a face-to-face classroom, like motivation, going at the pace of the students, understanding if an activity isn't working, don't keep trying, just stop it and go in another direction. Understanding when students are disengaged or when they're engaged, being able to see students' faces helps you to see, oh, she's lost, he's okay, oh, they're all lost, we've got a problem here. All these things apply as much online as they do face-to-face. I don't think we need to see them as two different environments, but I wouldn't say that they're different rooms, really. It's just a difference. It's just a different, the physicality is the difference. I think nearly all the things that apply to good face-to-face teaching apply to good online teaching. We just have to be a little bit innovative. And technology, I mean, if you're good at technology, you'll be happy to be innovative. You'll bring in other platforms. You'll use the, you can annotate all the slides. It's very easy to do. If you have slides, you can write on them. You can mark them. You can cross things out. You can bring down the whiteboard. Students can join the whiteboard. Students can put a PDF onto the screen share. All these things you can try and replicate the face-to-face classroom. But I don't separate them that much. I think good practice is good practice. Flipped classroom. Now, flipped classroom is, I think, really, really important because both online and face-to-face, but particularly online doesn't lend itself to long periods of silence. And I think if we want students to examine a piece of grammar, if we want them to read a longer text of some kind, if we want them to do some research about a subject that they're going to read or write about next lesson, that can so easily be done privately at home online. So I think flipped classroom is a time saver, one. Secondly, it produces very good educational skills, learning skills. The idea of a child, you're saying to a child, next week we're going to write a little essay about dinosaurs, for example. Here are 3 websites. Over the weekend, have a look at these websites. See what you can find out about dinosaurs. So they come into the lesson, whether it's online or face-to-face, full of ideas about dinosaurs. That's a great learning thing to do, isn't it? It also saves you a lot of time having to do that reading in class. Because I don't think extended reading in class is a good use of anyone's time. And I think flipped classrooms really provide themselves. Somebody was saying, well, there's lots of research. I can send some links later on, but there are a lot of areas that I can suggest. Yes, certainly. Someone asked me there. Okay, any other questions? No one switched on their microphone and no one switched on their cameras, but there we are. Are there any other questions? Nothing more in the chat box. There comes Anne. I'll just check the chat box again. Nope, I've only got a few minutes left. I think I've got. Okay. No more questions then. Okay, so that's me done. Anne.
I want to thank you so much for sharing ideas. I think you have reminded us of some things that we knew to do, but we forgot to do them.
That's often the case, isn't it?
And you've also brought up new ways of approaching the teaching, both in the classroom and in face-to-face. In fact, I was thinking, because I'm scheduled to teach summer school, I'm thinking, oh, I want to try this, I want to try that.
Are you all face to face now? Or are you still online in Kuwait?
No,
Where
we're
are
still
you?
online.
You're still online, yeah.
And at my university, we have been told even when we go back in the fall, it will be blended learning, because 1 week we will have half the students in our classes
They're doing
and
well.
others will. So we'll still be using Teams or Zoom, you know. for those.
Blended is another game. I find blended the hardest, actually, when you've got some students in the classroom and some students online, because you've got a split audience. I find that very
Yes.
challenging. I mean, face to face, fine. Online, fine. It's the compromise, isn't it? I
Yes,
thought you were back. UK, we're pretty much face
No.
to face for everything already. Oh,
No.
dear.
Thank you
there it is.
so much.
You're very welcome.
It's really been invaluable, and we look forward to, if you will send the slides, I will make sure that they get shared.
I'll do that,
Thank-
make them into a PDF, and I'll email it to you this morning.
And if I want to say to the attendees, if you want to get a certificate today, I have put in the chat box the address, okay? And Mrs. May has been putting it in there. I'm going to put it in again. So, okay, certificate, attendance certificate. There it is again. So please, you need to fill this out to get your attendance certificate. Thank you again. And I want to have a special thanks to Mara. We could not have done this without her.
Thank you, Mara.
She managed to get us in. She managed to get the breakout rooms going. So thank you, Mr. Graham. Thank you,
You're very welcome.
Mara. And we will not have another webinar until September. On September the 4th, Dr. Mohammed Etadali from Finland will be here joining us to talk about how to write an abstract for a proposal for a conference. Do hope that you will join us again. Thank you so much for being here, and inshallah, you have a very good day.
Thank you. All the
Goodbye.
best to you. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you. Thanks very much.